when Simu Liu was first announced to be cast as Shang-Chi, there was an article that came out where basically people were saying that they thought he was ugly. And I'm still, to this day, I'm like, how? What are y'all looking at? First of all, if y'all think he's ugly, hey, Simu, call me. I definitely don't think you're ugly. And your character might be the master of Kung Fu, but I feel like I'm the master of another type of art, if you get what I'm saying. Welcome to my safe haven, everyone. Thank you guys so much for joining me for another review here on the Black Gay Comic Geek channel. We are here to talk about Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. I'm so excited to finally talk publicly about this movie. The review embargo actually lifts tomorrow, which obviously if you guys are watching the review, it'd be today, August 23rd at 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So first and foremost, I want to say thank you to Marvel Studios and Disney for allowing me the opportunity to see this movie last week. If I was smart, I should have recorded the review right after I saw the movie or a couple days after I saw the movie as opposed to waiting a week, because now I got to try to go back and remember everything. But if you couldn't tell from the title of this episode, this is going to be a non-spoiler review because obviously the movie isn't out yet for the rest of you guys. The movie comes out next week, September 3rd in theaters. So with that said, before we jump into the review, first and foremost, if you guys can please hit that like button, it'll really help with the YouTube algorithm. But being that this movie is, I believe, unlike Black Widow, it's going only straight to theaters. A, are you excited about seeing Shang-Chi? Will you be seeing it in theaters? Do you plan on holding off from seeing this movie because you're still not comfortable with going to the movie theaters? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Be sure to like, comment, interact for the algorithm. Now let's talk about the movie. Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is directed by Destin Daniel Cretton, who did one of my favorite movies of 2019. That movie had me crying towards the end. But the Michael B. Jordan and Jamie Foxx starring movie called Just Mercy, based on a true story. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe that was his biggest movie. So when it was announced that he was the director of Shang-Chi, I was like, oh, hey, I know that guy. And I loved the last movie I saw of his. So I was excited about that. And this movie starring newcomer Simu Liu, who most people know from Kim's Convenience, and I've never seen Kim's Convenience, but I heard a lot of people say it was pretty good. This movie also co-stars Awkwafina, who mysteriously dropped her black scent for this movie. Imagine that. But yeah, we're not going to get into that for this review. That's a whole nother conversation. But it also has the wonderful Michelle Yeoh. This movie also stars Tony Lee Young, who apparently is making his Hollywood debut in this movie. He has a long list of filmography, but yeah, not in terms of American films. We already know from the trailer that Benedict Wong shows up as Wong, and Tim Roth is voicing, and I think he did the mocap as well for The Abomination, and a whole host of other actors. And the synopsis for the movie reads, martial arts master Shang-Chi confronts the past he thought he left behind when he's drawn into the web of the mysterious Ten Rings organization, led by none other than his father. And I never really read a whole lot of Shang-Chi comics, or really any Shang-Chi comics. I just knew of the character, and I knew he was considered the master of Kung Fu within the Marvel Comics universe, but I have read some of the character when he cameoed in other characters' comics, like for example, when he showed up in Spider-Man and taught him martial arts and proper fighting and developed a martial arts style called the Way of the Spider. I also know he helped train Wolverine for a little bit in comics, so he showed up in a Wolverine comic. And so I've seen like small cameos of the character here and there, and I knew he was like the best fighter in the Marvel Comics universe. But other than that, I don't really know that much about the character. And recently, I did read his very first introduction in Marvel Comics in 1973 in Special Marvel Edition number 15, created by Steve Englehart and Jim Starlin. But regardless of my knowledge of the character or my level of fandom for Shang-Chi, I was still excited for this movie because, you know, it's the first Marvel mostly led Asian superhero movie. And, you know, just the idea of just seeing something different. Another Marvel character, another property from the MCU, which doesn't really disappoint. And also something that's not populated by white men. Again, like how many movies have we had with white people? And, you know, this is only really the second movie outside of Black Panther that isn't a mostly white cast. So for that reason alone, I was excited about this movie. And so with that said, even though I pretty much knew nothing about this character except for the fact that he was the master of Kung Fu, and that was the entire reason he was created in the 70s in the first place, because to give you a little bit of film history, America was very excited and enthralled by Kung Fu movies. That's why Bruce Lee gained prominence in America. That's why a movie like The Last Dragon was created. And so my biggest thing going into this movie, I was like, I don't care how epic the story is, the acting, or anything like that. If the action is not because everybody remembers the fight scene between Bucky and Steve in Captain America the Winter Soldier when they were on the street, when they first met each other, how fluid the action sequence was, and how you could see literally every single movement between Chris Evans and Sebastian Stan, or the stunt double, and how you could see it was Sebastian Stan. It wasn't a whole lot of jump cuts and cut here, punch here, cut. Like, I was like, I want it to be the action sequence of the Winter Soldier dialed up to an 11. And if it's not that, I will be severely disappointed. Well, I am so glad to report that the action in this movie was epic. In terms of MCU action sequences, I would definitely say it is the best action of all the movies. And that's exactly what I wanted from this type of movie. It's basically a Marvel's Kung Fu movie. So I loved every single fight sequence that was in this movie. Hey, I'm at work right now, so I'm editing my YouTube video, so I had to throw this addition in there. I probably shouldn't be doing this, but whatever, who cares, sue me. But yeah, when I mentioned the action, it's not as good as like something like The Raid, but it's still, for the MCU, it's still damn good. And the thing that I also loved about the fight sequences, it wasn't heavily reliant on CGI. Like, it felt real, it felt and looked real. Now, obviously, just like in a lot of Kung Fu movies and things like that, you could tell the actors were on wires because they were jumping super high and things like that. But you don't need CGI to depict that, and it still looked great. You could also tell Simu Liu and even Tony Leung, Michelle Yeoh, and a lot of the other actors were performing a lot of the moves. And speaking of the actors, of course, I got to talk about my boy Simu Liu, who this is basically his introduction to the world on a larger scale. And yes, carrying the role of Shang-Chi. This guy is a star. This guy is definitely going to be in more places and in people's faces after this movie comes out. And I feel like a lot of people are going to love not only the character of Shang-Chi, but they're also going to love Simu Liu as the character of Shang-Chi. Just like people love Chris Evans as Steve Rogers, just like people love Chris Hemsworth as Thor, just like how people love Tom Hiddleston as Loki. I could go down the line for the majority of the people in the MCU. And just as Florence Pugh's Yelena Belova in the Black Widow movie was a great and welcome introduction to the MCU, so is the character of Shang-Chi and the world and the mythos that Shang-Chi introduced within the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, this movie was a great father and son, almost tragedy level story in the aspect of what would you do if your father was like one of the biggest villains in the world, almost kind of on the level of like when Luke Skywalker found out his father was Darth Vader. The only difference is Shang-Chi always knew who his father was, and kind of like you saw in the trailer where his father confronts him, basically said, I gave you 10 years to live your life. Now it's time to come home and do what I groomed you for. And speaking of his father, Tony Leung, like, this man in this role, and this is also the great thing that I appreciate about the MCU, at least with regards to Marvel Studios, is because a lot of these characters were created during times where race relations and representation was not the greatest in whether it was comics and movies and TV shows, books, media in general. And I appreciate that Marvel and Kevin Feige is at least recognizing that to some extent. Now, there are some pitfalls like what they did with the Ancient One in Doctor Strange, and a large part of those pitfalls is not having people of that race and ethnicity or sexual orientation in the room when they're making certain decisions, because I'm pretty sure if they had more Asian representation in the writer's room for Doctor Strange, now granted, I don't know how many they had, but I'm pretty sure they didn't really have that many or zero to none, because when Kevin Feige was like, oh yeah, could we have created or cast an Asian person as the Ancient One and not made it problematic? Absolutely we could could, but we are trying not to make it a problematic stereotype. I'm like, how many Asian people did y'all have behind the scenes to make it not a problematic stereotype? Just like you took the character of M'Baku, who was considered or known as the character of Man-Ape in the Black Panther comics. Guess what? You had a whole lot of black people behind the scenes, not just in front of, but behind the camera. They were able to take the character of M'Baku and modernize him and make him not problematic at all. And you get to the character of Shang-Chi, and they were able to do the same thing with Shang-Chi's father, because in the comics, his father was Fu Manchu, which is like a racist, problematic caricature of an Asian character at that time in comics. And they also addressed one of Iron Man's biggest villain in comics called the Mandarin. And in the MCU, they were merging Fu Manchu and the Mandarin in one, and they pretty much addressed a lot of those issues and problems in this movie, and I appreciated them taking a problematic trope and fixing it. So yeah, guys, representation matters, not only in front of the camera, but also behind the camera. And so with that, you have Tony Leung. I keep saying Tony Lee Young as if I'm saying like his middle name is Lee, but it's Leung, so it's Leung, Tony Leung. So with that said, like, I'm glad they addressed also, like, because Kevin Feige did talk about it, and you also saw it in the very first Iron Man movie, the 10 rings, the symbol of the 10 rings. So they've been teasing this character showing up since Iron Man 1 that came out in 2008. And so they do address and call back to the Iron Man movies in this movie, and the way they do it is both surprising and funny. And that's also another thing with this movie. Like, obviously, you know, it's the Marvel Cinematic Universe. A lot of their movies always have jokes and they're funny and everything like that. And so yeah, this movie was hilarious. And as much as I don't want to admit it, but yeah, Awkwafina's chemistry with Simu Liu in this movie was great to watch. Like, the dynamic between the two of them, her playing his best friend known as Katie, who I don't think that character is a comic book character. I think they were made up specifically for this movie. But the chemistry between the two of them was great. Yeah, just like I said earlier, like in this movie, she mysteriously dropped her black scent. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, Google it. But I know a lot of people say, oh, well, she's from Queens. She's not putting on an accent. Okay, if she's not putting it on, why is it suddenly gone all of a sudden? She doesn't talk like that and move and have mannerisms like that in every single movie and every, like, it's basically the stereotypical black girl stuff that she did in Ocean's 11 or the movie that I first saw her in, Crazy Rich Asians. And even though I did love that movie, like, the way she was portraying that character definitely rubbed me the wrong way. Like, yeah, you need to do all that. You need to roll up on it. Oh, girl. Again, it was a stereotype based on black culture, black American culture. But yeah, she's definitely problematic in real life, and she needs to acknowledge, address, apologize, and move on from that persona that she's created. But in terms of the movie itself, her character, I enjoyed her character and her relationship and her chemistry with Simu Liu. And also, to throw this out there, side note, I actually met her in real life, and she didn't sound or talk or act like, you know, because everybody keeps saying, well, she's from Queens, of course she sounds like that. No, her deep voice, her voice being as deep and distinct as it is, that's how she sounds. But all that extra emphasis and mannerisms and all that, that's not how she, again, like I said, I met her in real life. She stayed at my job, because again, I say this all the time, I work overnights at a hotel, and she stayed at my hotel. And so I spoke to her. I didn't know who she was at first because she had a hoodie on and everything like that. And it wasn't until after I served her and somebody else walked up to me and it was like, yo, that was Awkwafina. I was like, oh, that was? Oh, that makes sense, because obviously I recognized her voice, but I wasn't really paying too much attention. But even still, despite that, she wasn't the one. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, yeah, she's problematic and she needs to address it, but talking about the movie in and of itself, especially considering her most recent comments in an interview that she did where she says she refuses to do an Asian accent and how she doesn't want to become a minstrel of the Asian people and Asian representation. So I'm like, so you can understand that with regards to Asian people, but you can't understand what you were doing with a caricature of mimicking stereotypical black people. Anyway, moving on. I do kind of wonder how Chinese American, specifically, audiences will react to the movie and the character of Shang-Chi, because I think in the comics, Shang-Chi was, his mother is American and he was also born in America, so he is a Chinese American superhero. However, in the movies, I don't think he's Chinese American. I think he's completely all Chinese. And so I'm not sure why the change was, but I'm curious of how, again, Chinese American audiences specifically will react to that. Or if they really care. They probably won't even care. I don't know. I can't speak to that. But like I said, I'm curious. But yeah, but also with that, the score for this movie was pretty great, especially in combination with the action sequences. Like, it just got me hyped. And I also really enjoyed, loved the actor Menger Zhang, I think that's how you say her name, who played Shang-Chi's sister, Xialing. Like, her character was just great, and I cannot wait to see more of that character within the MCU and the Shang-Chi movies going forward. And oh man, there are 2 post-credit scenes in this movie. Like, the first post-credit scene, I was just like, wait, what does this mean? What is happening? I'm confused. Like, I need answers. Like, yeah, that first post-credit scene, I was just like, so yeah, it definitely leads into more into, you know, the MCU going forward, and would definitely have more callbacks in the greater MCU universe. And then the second post-credit scene just had me excited for another Shang-Chi movie, because I'm just like, wait, does this mean, but how does that, but then what about their wait, what? Again, non-spoilers, can't say a lot. And then also there are a couple surprises in this movie, and a character who I didn't know was going to show up in the movie that ends up showing up in the movie, and the role that he has. And I will talk about this more when I actually do a spoiler review. I think I am going to go live. At least I'm going to try to go live. I'm going to hit up Ron and see if he's available after he sees the movie. And we're going to talk about this movie live, because there's certain issues that I have with certain things and certain things that they did, specifically with a character that I'm talking about. And I'm just like, all right, come on. But in terms of like the writing and storytelling of it, I enjoyed it. I thought it was funny. But yeah, well, I know that was cryptic, but I'll talk more about it later. Now, with that said, despite overall really enjoying this movie, I will say, and this is a thing that I talked about before, I think I talked about it in Black Widow, and then just other comic book movies or just action movies in general, like, I just don't understand the big draw or push for these actors, directors, or maybe it was this coming from the studios directly. Maybe it could be coming from Kevin Feige, but what is their idea, or why do they keep deciding to make the third act in these movies this giant CGI spectacle? And that's exactly what they did in this movie. They did the same thing in Black Widow. They did the same thing in Black Panther. They did the same thing in Spider-Man Far From Home. Like, I could go on and on and on. And I'm like, I would have preferred this movie to end on like a giant fight scene of martial arts and like, this is a kung fu movie. This is a martial arts movie. I didn't want like a giant CGI mess. I don't want to say mess. It wasn't a mess. I will say, on a positive note, what they gave us for the CGI, I really enjoyed. I thought it looked great, and the soundtrack and everything like that, it was great. Like, in terms of the package that I was presented, it was a great package, but I would have preferred something else. And so that, and also because of the way the movie ended and how it ended, there was also some, you know, moments where, you know, the characters was like, certain things have to happen to get to a certain beat, or to fulfill a certain moment in the plot, where you're just like, that doesn't make any sense, and that was very convenient that this happened. So I'm just like, all right, yeah, it was for the plot, I guess. And I didn't feel that way or start thinking those thoughts in the movie until we got to the end. And so again, even though I still enjoyed the ending, I wish we got something else. So because of that, I do kind of wish the ending was a little bit stronger. And I say all that to say, it's not because I hear when I say certain things, especially because in the world of the internet, it's like the world of the internet only exists in absolute. So because I say, oh, I wish it ended a little bit better, people will probably take that and be like, oh, I hated the ending, or the ending is trash. It's like, no, the ending was great. I just wanted it to be even better. Like, I wanted it to be epic. I wanted it to end like, holy crap, that was amazing. Like, I don't know. But yeah, but at the end of the day, I still really enjoyed the movie. I was hyped watching this movie. I totally plan on watching this movie again. And I would say for me, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings is definitely a very high hit. Almost hitting Blockbuster, but not quite. But anyway, that's enough for me talking. It's like 9:20, so I got to get ready to get dressed and go to work tonight, which I'm hoping that tropical storm is not, because I'm like, I haven't checked the weather. I'm like, it's supposed to be a tropical storm hitting the New York, New Jersey area tonight. And I'm like, yeah, I got to drive to New York tonight. That's going to suck. But anyway, enough about my trauma and everything like that, my problems in life. But the question is, are you guys excited about seeing Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings again? Are you going to see it in theaters? Let me know down in the comment section below. And also, once again, if you can hit that like button, it'll really help with the YouTube algorithm. And if you hit the like button on this video, it'll tell me that you want me to go live with Ron and do a spoiler review of Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings. How much do you like me? How much do you like the video? And also, if this is one of your first time checking out one of my videos, please check out the other videos on my channel. And if you like what you see, please subscribe for more and hit that bell notification button so you're alerted every single time I post a new video. And tell your friends, families, and neighbors about my channel to help me continue to grow. And as always, I will catch you guys next time.